Welcome back to Sermon Rewind. My name is Todd, and that is Jordan.
Hello, hello.
We've been gone for a little bit, but we're back, and we are going to do a new format.
Yeah, slightly new.
Slightly new format. Yeah. And also, we're going to be doing an audio-only version.
That's
so we're
true.
going to have to make sure that we don't talk like there's things that people have to see, because they're just going to be listening.
I make no promises.
Okay.
All right.
Well, it's a work in progress. We are in a series called Into the Wilderness.
Mm-hmm. Lent 2024.
Lent. Yes. I could say that we're into the desert.
Yeah.
As people are giving up dessert.
Wow.
Little dad joke there.
Yeah, well done.
Okay.
Timing.
Matthew 4, verses 8 to 11.
Mm-hmm.
Big idea. All temptation is ultimately about leading us to worship.
Correct.
Okay?
Yeah.
And you had a 2-point sermon. Worship that leads to death,
mm-hmm.
and worship that leads to life.
Yep.
Fairly straightforward.
You know what? You'd think so.
Well, in terms of the sermon points, at least.
Yeah. I like to keep it simple.
Yeah. We've created a dichotomy.
Right.
So let me start there. So the word worship has got a lot going on.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
How do we know what we're doing, or I should say, how we are approaching things is worship? And let me give you the additional caveat of, when people think of worship, they think of, bowing down in front of things, right?
Or singing.
Right? Yeah. Sunday mornings.
Right.
How do we know what we're doing or how we're approaching something is actually worship, as opposed to, I just kind of like that?
Yeah, no, that's good. I think it has to do with allegiance. I really think that is the clear, definitive indication that you've crossed over from being enamored with something to worshiping something, right? There's lots of things you like. There's lots of things that are appealing to you, but the point in which you are so moved by those things or those people that you will commit some semblance of allegiance to them to fulfill something in your life, you've crossed over that bridge.
Okay, but allegiance, now we're replacing one interpretive word with a different interpretive word.
Yeah,
but let me go more pragmatic, because you did list some things: safety, security, family,
mm-hmm.
freedom, health, and ability to travel.
Yeah.
Like essentially having means
right.
to do certain things.
Yeah. Freedom means all of it.
We could add like health insurance in there, your 401k, that sort of thing. But I think you would probably also say, and you have said, these aren't bad things necessarily.
No, they're great things.
To own a home, to have a family, to go see parts of God's world.
Incredible gifts.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
How do we know when it is allegiance? Then it's not just kind of a good God zone of I'm going to go home to my family and I'm going to go to work.
Right.
And I might check my 401k statement just to see what's there. And maybe I will plan a trip to go to a cool place.
Right.
When is it allegiance? When do we need to be worried?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question for everybody. But I can only speculate on this, but my assumption is the point in which your committedness to it is inappropriate. And perhaps a better way of saying it is this. If you asked yourself the question, what can I not live without? Not, would I be really sad if I didn't have? Would my life take on a different form and shape if I didn't have? But what, where the rubber meets the road, can I not live without? I can't move forward. I can't exist. I won't exist. I'll fight tooth and nail, even to the point of losing my life over X, Y, and Z. That is the point, and that's what I meant by allegiance. So that's the point in which we've crossed a bridge that we can't cross back.
So that people will say, okay, sure, I get that. How would we test that aside from doing something drastic, like sell my house and just give away all the money to the first nonprofit I come across, or the church?
Sure.
Jesus asked the rich young ruler, just do that.
Yeah. Give up all your stuff.
Give up all your stuff.
Yes. I think some of that's maybe more difficult when it comes to the realm of testing something. However, this is sort of the mantra to fasting, in whatever way you understand fasting to be, whether it's food or whatever. It's the process in which you starve yourself of things that you love and reorient your loves in a place that's ultimately fulfilling and satisfying in Jesus. So I don't know that you could as easily just say, well, I'm going to temporarily give my house away, just to find out if I couldn't live without it, right? But there are a lot of things leading up to that I think you can temporarily remove from your life to see how you weather it.
Sure. Well, and I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday. Sometimes I think we say we could give something up because we know we have the means to reacquire it.
Fair. Yeah.
So if I said, okay, I have certain possessions, sure, I could give those up. But then I go, well, if I really missed them, I think I could replace them.
Yeah.
Type of thing.
Right.
Do you feel like then when we do give those types of things, is that enough to really get a feel for that? Because just to bring people up to speed, we've been doing a number of fasts over Lent, or at least you've suggested a number of fasts. I don't know how many people are actually participating.
Never know.
But they've been different types of fasts. Like one was actually food, one was electronics, one was creature comforts, and you left a level of interpretation to the person. Right. So is there a way for us, again, to kind of take our own temperature in terms of whether this is actually kicking in? Like, is this fast actually doing what's intended to do in this season, or just in general in terms of where our faith walk is?
Yeah, I think it's just like with anything, you get out of it what you intend to get out of it, right? Like you can say, oh, I'm gonna go practice a sport, and really I'm gonna give it 10 minutes a week, and maybe I'm gonna shoot a basketball around. You're gonna get out of that what you give to it, right? But if you enter into an intense, legitimate, purposeful time of practice in your life to form you, to shape you, then you're gonna get out of that, benefit upon benefit. So I would just say, like, if Todd Pfeiffer knows that I have potentially an idolatrous, worshipful leaning of allegiance to, let's just say, saving money, makes me feel safe, makes me feel confident, whatever. A good way of testing that is saying, okay, I know what I have in my savings account. My wife and I, we're going to sit down, we're going to talk, we're going to take a big chunk out, and we're going to give it away.
Right. And
we're going to see how we weather that. And if I start hyperventilating, and losing my mind over it, that's an indicator that maybe there's a bigger problem here than I thought. If at the end of the day you go, I'm going to take $20 out and give it, that's probably not a good finger on the pulse action. Right. So you get out of it what you put into it.
Well, and I think, we have tried to adhere to each of these fasts. A couple of them were more difficult, and a few of them were it just wasn't really a big deal to do them.
To some.
For us, for those. Yeah. Others of them that maybe we had trouble with, maybe would have been easier for other people.
Right.
Let me ask you a sort of a different version. And this was actually a question submitted by one of the listeners.
Thank you for that, by the way.
Yes, we did ask people to write questions, and we're going to hopefully get more questions in the future. What if we deceive ourselves to believe that the temptation is serving and worshiping God? Now, there's a lot of different directions we can go with that, but how do you approach that type of question?
So tease that out a little bit from your perspective, because I think I'm having trouble maybe putting that together in my mind.
Well, they also ask, how do you discern God's will from temptation?
Okay. It's a tough one. So let me see if I can create a scenario. You tell me if I'm even coming anywhere near the mark. So how do we know that whatever we're being tempted to do isn't ultimately something God would want us to do?
Right.
Does that sound about right? Well, I would argue that that's never temptation. Right? Like he is not tempting. Temptation indicates that we're being drawn away from something good towards territory that's bad, right? Otherwise, if the Lord is drawing you towards something that's good that he wants you to do, that's not temptation, that's calling, right? So he is drawing you to something that is good and holy. If you're stuck in between these two worlds where the big question is, shoot, is this thing that I thought was good, is this God's voice or is this Satan's voice? Now that's a different dilemma to have.
Yeah. Well, I think the challenge for the Christians sometimes is we have certain impulses. We have certain thoughts.
Sure.
We are drawn to certain things. Things feel right to us, and they don't necessarily feel bad. Similar to the question we had before when we were talking about safety, security, family, these sorts of things where we say, this is all good. Right. That there's a gray zone there in terms of where it goes from, it's God honoring to it's a worldly allegiance. Sure. I guess the other thing you could look at this is in terms of worshiping, like we equate sometimes church work with something that is inherently good. Oh, I'm serving on this committee. Oh, I want to do this project at church. Oh, I think the church should go this direction. Is that, again, us wanting something that is God honoring, or is that something that we want? I mean, I sent you sort of a playful question because you ask for people to respond sometimes to your sermons.
Sure.
Well, I mean, not specifically, but you're getting a barometer of how engaged people are.
I want to make sure people are still awake.
Make sure they're still awake because you know that the spoken word, people start to drift off, even if it's compelling.
Right.
And you want to know whether or not, people are really into that.
Yeah.
You could say, hey, I'd love a little affirmation here for myself as a preacher, as a person who is trying to do a job. And if I just got a bunch of slack-faced, silent congregants, then maybe what I'm doing isn't that good, right? Or you could say, I genuinely want to hear that people are engaging in the content that I'm saying. It's not about me, Jordan, the preacher, receiving attaboys.
Right.
It's them saying, oh yeah, what he's saying is actually biblical. I don't know. Maybe that's what they're getting at a little bit, because you could say, hey, I want to hear from the congregation.
Yeah.
But you're still a guy. You're still human. You'd like to know that you're doing a good job.
Sure.
If someone comes to you and says, that was a good sermon. Yeah, that's nice to hear.
Right. Not all that helpful.
Not always helpful. But again, temptation is to say, I'd like to hear people say, good sermon.
Yeah.
Or is temptation, I want to hear people say, thank you for connecting me to Scripture.
Right.
Thank you for connecting me to God's will.
Yeah. Because I think that's a fair indicator between the two, because I would argue potentially, whether it's normal and natural or not, those two voices that we're hearing, one that says, man, it would be great to get some personal affirmation, or I really just want to know if these points are landing in a way that is healthy and helpful. Those are two very different ends, right?
They are.
One is, I would argue, potentially self-worship, and the other is worship of essentially what Christ is desiring for his people, their spiritual formation and growth. So I think that's maybe a good kind of test case. And I would just argue in that moment, you have to ask those really big questions, like, who's this about? Right. Who gets the glory? Who's ultimately served best in this moment? And whose name becomes famous at the end of it?
And ask other people around us.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Let the Scripture speak. Let your people speak. Bring people close into your life that'll speak into those things. Absolutely.
And with that, we're out of time.
Yeah, just like that.
Just like that.
Yeah.
So if you're watching online or if you're listening on one of our podcast channels, we appreciate you joining us. As we move forward, we are going to want this to be a participation sport. So if you join us on Sunday mornings for the sermon, either in person or online, please be writing questions for us to discuss. Ideally, it's about the sermon, but if you got other stuff and we get enough questions about a certain topic, then we'll do a few special one-off episodes. Yeah. So thanks for joining us with Sermon Rewind.
See you soon.